Hi everyone, and welcome to a tour of my second home lab. Well, a home lab in my second home at least. And I think this room has a story to itself, but before we talk about any of this stuff, let's go to the home lab, which is in the closet here. And here we are. A jump cut later, and we are now in an angle where you can truly see that this is not much of a home lab, more a storage closet. Either way, this is where all of the home lab equipment that I have access to and have configured is. I want to start at the beginning, but before we get to that, let's do the most boring thing of this entire setup, which is the Synology box over here. It's one of those 12-bay Synology DS3622XS models that's running 12 18 terabyte 3.5-inch hard drives. That's running in SHR2, which is similar to RAID 6, providing roughly 180 terabytes worth of data for this entire communal office space, served out to the computers over here by two 10 gigabit lines. The drive array behind the disks is backed up by two 2 terabyte NVMe disks that's acting as a read-write cache and also stores the metadata for the ButterFS file system that's on top of the drive pool. On the back of the unit here, it is supplied with two 10 gigabit ports, that's those two 1 gigabit ports and a single 1 gigabit out-of-band connection port. The out-of-band connection port is used when the Synology box here is off. The two 1 gigabit port is connectivity for some of the Docker management containers that's running on it, and the two 10 gigabit connections are used solely for storing and sharing data. It also has two ports for two additional 12-bay extension units, but the 180 terabytes that's on here is plenty right now. It may look like it does not have one of the extension cards. Wow, that's a lot of dust. But in here is the caching drives that I was talking about before. Other than that, it has been upgraded to 64 gigabytes of RAM, so this is plenty capable of saturating the two 10 gigabit connections with two simultaneous connections hitting it, mostly of people editing. Let's go over to the bulk of the cables here. On top, it's not very great, but on the way down, we have all of the connections. There we go. I've put you down over there so that I have a bit more space to walk through everything here. Coming in from the top is the ISP internet. This is the ISP converting coax cable to regular Ethernet. This is synchronous 1 gigabit Ethernet, which is pretty common here in Copenhagen, Denmark. And that's supplying internet to the WAN connection of the top UDM Dream Machine Pro here through this green cable. There's then a 10 gigabit copper DAC cable connecting to this bottom switch here. This is the switch 16XG, one of the first generation 10 gigabit switches, supplying connection to these 12 10 gigabit SFP Plus connections and also these 4 10 gigabit regular Ethernet connections. I believe that when these are used in 10 gigabit mode, these 4 SFP connections are disabled. I can't remember, but either way, we're not using these right now. And the two 10 gigabit connections here are the same 2 10 gigabit connections coming in roughly there, I think, on the Synology box. That makes this 10 gigabit switch the core switch of the network, and through the other 10 gigabit SFP DAC, this USW PoE switch is connected. This is one of the 24 port versions that's getting connections here. I recently did an upgrade in here where I switched out all of the first generation devices out. This office used to run a 48 port non-PoE switch here, and then on the bottom it used a 16 port gigabit switch which had PoE, but we consolidated both of those devices into this one. And the UDM Dream Machine Pro was one of the old USG firewalls, and then one of the like 1.5 generation cloud keys. I never really liked that product, so we consolidated those 4 devices into these two. I think I did a mistake by going with the 24 port PoE switch instead of going with the 48 port switch. Don't get me wrong, the owner of the place here was really happy that I got a great offer on the 24 port. But I think I did him a disservice in the end by choosing this instead of one of the larger ones, because as you can see, it's already starved for ports And inevitably at some point in the future we're going to need more ports, and I don't have them available right now. Going a bit down, more down here in the rack, from the top you of course have the USB here. There are the two 24-port patch panels. Then there's the 24-port switch here. That's just a blanking panel, pretty cool. The 10 gigabit switch. There are three 1U blanking panels. Another blanking panel with brushes for wires. This is a 1U Shuko power rack. There are two another spacers here. This is one of those cool My Electronics from Holland that can take three NUC devices. This used to do some ingest, but it has been worked to one of the other stations, so that's not in use. And on the very bottom here, it's actually one of my Synology boxes, an RS819 4-bay Synology port that's just running, I think, 1 or 2 gigabytes of non-upgradable RAM. It has some Realtek chip from years ago. And as you can see, the status light is on. One of the fans is not working in here, but the drives are pretty much doing nothing. This is just backup from my home stuff, so I think this is fine for now. Other than that, we are running some AOC cables out to the workstations over there. There used to be more AOC cables, but we've done a bit of cleanup here. And I think that is about it. We can take a look at these 4 cables here, which are other colors. Those are for the access points around the office here. And that's just patching for the access points around the office. Then there is a missing section of this switch here. There used to be a third 24-port patch panel, but it only had 4 devices going through it. You can see in here, that's keystone connectors going into some building stuff here. And since this patch panel and this one, these 2 sections were not connected, I just took out the bottom one here to save 1U. This leaves 6U worth of open stuff here, since these are obviously not equipped with anything. These 2 are not, and this one can be taken out, which is perfect because the company that sits here, they want to have 2 ingest stations, and I can use the short-depth sleeker stuff for a ingest station here and an ingest station here. That might be a project for the future. But I think we've spent enough time looking at this rack. Let's look at the other stuff that's in this room, because this room has quite a lot of history. I've backed up just a bit to get a better view of everything. All of this stuff was in here before I arrived, and I don't know much about it. I don't recognize much of this equipment, but I think that it's all telco equipment. Please provide me with some information in the comment section if you know what this is. That's obviously the WAN connection coming in somewhere, but it's just being terminated to these patch fiber stuff. Those are not doing anything, but there is another WAN connection. Let me correct my obviously, because this was totally not what was happening either way. This is the WAN connection coming in here, being converted into coax, and then immediately being converted back to Ethernet as well. I've talked to the ISP about just doing straight fiber into the equipment of this stuff, but they apparently can't do it or something like that. So the core of the area here, of course, is the 10 gigabit switch and the Synology that provides stuff for the editing stations out here in the first communal workplace. Let's talk a bit about what's going on out here. The room out here holds a special place in my heart because this used to be my room. When I was much younger, I desperately wanted to be an entrepreneur just like everyone else, and I started a company with a friend that sold e-learning to companies. We did pretty great to begin with, and we were granted this room in a much larger office building that's this way outside of that door, but we won't go out there today. And I built this room from the ground up. I obviously don't work here anymore, and I've sold all of this stuff, so none of this is mine anymore. But that still doesn't defeat the point that every single wire in here is something that I pulled. Every table, every workstation, everything is something that I built. And while everything in here is in dismay at this point, it is something that I at least used to be very proud of. So let's go through what was in here once upon a time. The room has changed a bit since I was in here last time. When I was here, there was 4 workstations along this wall, and this rack shelving unit was not there. There's just enough space for the 4 tables. And then moving over here, these 2 tables were still there, but there was a third, much larger table here in front of. And then this junk section over here was not there, and there was another table here, another long table with a workstation there. This workstation has been taken down entirely, but these 2 are still being used by the company over there. And if you look at this very computer, will you look at that? That's the computer that I built for my Christmas calendar thing. I'll leave a link to that in the description. It's not very good, but if you really want to, I guess you can watch it. The computer itself is a Core i7 something, 12th generation with 64 gigabytes of RAM. It has an RX 6600 graphics card. There's a 1 terabyte boot SSD. And in the very bottom, you'll see this Intel 2-port 10 gigabit NIC, of which currently only a single one is being used. That's connecting to the aforementioned NAS out there. Very great. It's running 2 25-inch 2560 by 1400 Dell monitors, which are pretty nice. These are 60 Hertz, but I mean, who cares? It's just for work. There's some gamer-esque keyboard here and some speakers. I think one of the nice points that I really wanted to get through with these tables is the fact that they are only using a single power cord for the power to the table. Everything else is put up in these neat cable management underneath the tables. And all of the networking is run in these DAC cables going along the Fensterbank over here and then through holes in the wall that I dug in the middle of the night so that nobody would hear me. And the other section of the door here has them as well, running all the way along to supply networking connectivity to the workstations. This means that in the event of, cleaning or just pretty much basic maintenance, it's possible to grab a hold of the table and pull the entire table out. And of course the cable harness is a bit slicky here, but I bet you know what I mean. This means that the entire table can go up and down with the raise feature here without causing a fuss to the cables, which is very cool if you want to work standing up. Moving along, the next workstation here is actually my very old computer. Once again, I sold this to the company that now owns the place, but in behind here is a 7th gen 7700K that's delidded and liquid metaled. It's overclocked to 5.1 gigahertz. At least that's what I was running on it back in the day. It was a great overclocking chip. I think it has been taken down just a couple of notches now to make it more stable. But it's running, I think, 32 gigabytes of DDR4, a 1070 graphics card, and another one of those Intel 10 gigabit NICs. I think there is a 1 terabyte SSD in there, probably there somewhere. And when I had this, it was not running in these fractal torrent cases. It was running in, I think it's actually still in here. Yeah, there it is. Another fractal design case. This is sentimental value to me, but far too large to use to anything useful right now. Then again, there was a 4th workstation here with similar stuff. Back then, the entire office had 6th gen Intel stuff. I had my 7th gen, which was entirely new at the time, and we were doing a lot of editing here. There was another table. Well, this table is still here, but this place was occupied as well. Over here were the 2 other editors, the boss of the company that I started. I was like the CTO, he was the CEO, he was sitting here. And while these monitors are new, the boss man had a similar setup. I think this is pretty funny. These are all 2560 by 1440p monitors, but obviously that one is larger. I think these 2 are 25 inches and this one must be 27 or something. There's a Ryzen workstation there, and he's using a 10 keyless keyboard. Cool, I guess. This has fallen into dismay. I don't really know what to say about it, but at least here are the old networking equipment that I took out last weekend. Pretty good consolidation if you ask me. And I think that just about wraps it up. There's a lot of stuff outside that I could show you, but I don't really want to do that. So what do I call this? My home lab. Like I said, I used to work here when I was an entrepreneur, and I've spent so many hours of my time, of my life in here. I used to have like a secret nook out behind somewhere where I would sleep. It would be those, you know, young, awesome days where you would be working to very late in the evening, and then I would go to bed, hide. I was not supposed to sleep here, but I had a sleeping pad and a, you know, small sleeping bag that I'd sleep on. Then I'd sleep in my small nook and just set the alarm to wake up before anyone arrived. And then that'd be pretty cool. I think that's just about wraps it up. Like I said, if you know what this equipment is, please let me know. I'd love to take it down because I think it looks like shit. Other than that, I don't think there's any more else to say. I hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, if you want to see the video about that one, look in the description. Otherwise, pretty cool. See you around.